You expect me to share a bed with her?" Celeste Ward's voice cut through the marble lobby so sharply that even the bellman stopped rolling the luggage cart. Behind her, 12 people from Haleworth Dynamics turned to stare at me, as if I had personally arranged the storm. The overbooked hotel, and the single remaining suite with one king-size bed. I stood beneath the chandelier of the Denver Grand Meridian, still holding my carry-on handle, feeling the heat crawl up my neck, while Marcus Vale smiled like a man watching a trap close exactly on schedule. The receptionist looked trapped between policy and panic. "I'm sorry, Miss Ward. Due to the conference overflow and airport cancellations, this is the only available room under your company block." Celeste's eyes flicked to me, cold and silver gray. "Then give it to her. I'll sleep in the lobby before I let Harper Lane touch my laptop." A few people laughed. Not loudly, but enough to make it worse. Public cruelty never needed volume. It only needed witnesses. Marcus stepped beside Celeste, smoothing the cuff of his navy suit as if he were calming a frightened client instead of feeding the humiliation. "Let's not be dramatic," he said, his voice warm enough to fool anyone who had never been cornered by it. Then he glanced at me with that polished disappointment he used in boardrooms. "Harper, I know you've always wanted more access to Celeste's work, but this is a professional trip. We cannot afford another misunderstanding. Another misunderstanding." That was what he called the night my draft vanished from the server and reappeared under Celeste's name. That was what he called the leaked data packet. Everyone blamed on me. My fingers curled around the scratched silver USB in my blazer pocket until its edge bit my palm. Celeste's face did not soften. If anything, my silence seemed to confirm every ugly thing she believed about me. "I want a written note from the front desk that I objected to this arrangement," she said, still looking at me. "Not the receptionist. And I want corporate security to log that my files were secured before she entered the room." The words landed harder than a slap because she said them like procedure, not insult. Behind us, Julian from finance whispered something to the woman beside him, and she covered her mouth to hide a smile. I could have opened my mouth. I could have said that Celeste's precious pitch had 3 formulas in it that I wrote 6 months ago. I could have told them Marcus knew exactly why the reservation was wrong. Instead, I swallowed the truth like broken glass. Because my little brother Jonah's heart medication came through Haleworth's insurance, and Marcus had reminded me of that before we boarded the plane. He had done it quietly. Of course, Marcus Vale never threatened anyone in a way that could be printed. At O'Hare, while Celeste took a call near the first-class lounge and the rest of us lined up for boarding, he had leaned close enough for me to smell his expensive cedar cologne. "Denver is important, Harper," he had murmured. "No emotional outbursts. No accusation. No heroic little speeches about who built what. Your brother's specialist is still in network, because I made sure of it." Then he smiled at the gate agent and handed over his ticket like a gentleman. I had spent the entire flight staring at the clouds, telling myself I could survive 3 days. 3 days of being invisible. 3 days of letting Marcus use my work, because Jonah needed another surgery consultation in July. I thought that was the bargain. I had not realized Marcus planned to make me look dangerous before the first night was over. The receptionist finally slid 2 key cards across the counter, as if handing over evidence. Celeste snatched one without touching my hand. I took the other and noticed something odd before I could stop myself. My card had a thin black mark near the magnetic strip, the kind hotels used when a key had been reissued Marcus's eyes dropped to it for half a second. Almost nothing. But I had survived at Haleworth by noticing almost nothing. I tucked the key into my bag beside the USB and lifted my chin. "I'll stay out of your way," I told Celeste. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She gave a short, humorless laugh. That would be a first. Marcus placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive from the outside and possessive if you knew where to look. "Good. Now, everyone freshen up. Cocktail reception in 40 minutes. And Harper, try not to make tonight about yourself." By the time I reached the suite, Celeste had already claimed the desk, the wall outlet, the luggage rack, and the side of the bed farthest from the door. Her garment bag hung open, revealing a cream blazer that probably cost more than my rent. I set my suitcase near the armchair and looked at the single bed between us. It was absurdly large, and still not large enough for all the history Marcus had shoved into that room. Celeste opened her laptop and angled the screen away. "I'm serious," she said, without looking up. "If I find one file opened, one folder moved, one login attempt, I'll report you myself." I wanted to ask whether she truly believed I was stupid enough to steal from her in a room she knew I was sharing. Instead, I walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and pressed my fist against my mouth until the urge to scream passed. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes were dry. That felt worse than crying. The cocktail reception took place under golden lights in the hotel ballroom, where executives balanced champagne flutes and pretended they were not measuring one another's worth by job title. Haleworth's Denver pitch was the kind of deal people killed careers over $800 million to build a predictive data system across a private hospital network. Marcus wanted it because winning would make him chief operating officer by fall. Celeste wanted it because everyone had told her since business school that she was born to win. I wanted it because I had built the original model after 3 months of sleeping 4 hours a night beside Jonah's hospital bed. Yet as I stood near the buffet with sparkling water in my hand, I heard Julian say, "Careful. Celeste, Harper's close enough to inhale your strategy." Someone laughed again. I looked down at my drink and watched the bubbles rise like tiny trapped things. Marcus found me near the side entrance, just as the hospital delegation arrived. "Smile," he said softly, leaning close enough that no one else could hear. "You look guilty when you sulk." I turned to walk away, but he caught my elbow with 2 fingers, gentle enough to seem harmless, firm enough to stop me. "Remember, Harper, perception is the only truth that matters." It was his favorite line. He had said it after my disciplinary review. He had said it when Celeste was announced as lead strategist on my project. He had said it the day I learned my complaint had been marked unsupported. Across the ballroom, Celeste was speaking with Dr. Elaine Porter from the hospital network. Her smile flawless, her posture perfect. Marcus released my arm and drifted toward them. I reached into my bag for my phone to check Jonah's messages, and my fingers brushed something that should not have been there, a folded packet of printed documents. Thick, varm, and freshly placed. I froze. The top page had a red confidential stamp across it, along with the hospital network's financial projections for the very contract we were there to win. My stomach dropped so fast, I nearly lost my balance. Before I could shove the packet back or pull it out, or understand how it had appeared inside my bag, Marcus's voice carried across the ballroom. "Harper," he sounded concerned. Of course he did. The room turned. Celeste turned too, her expression sharpening. Marcus walked toward me with Diane Roswell from internal legal at his side, as if he had summoned her before I even found the bait. There's been a concern about restricted documents leaving the secure prep room, Marcus announced, not loudly, but with perfect clarity. I'm sure this is nothing, but given our history, we need to be transparent. Given our history, my hand was still inside my bag. Around us, conversations died one by one. Diane's face tightened with professional discomfort. Harper, I need you to remove your hand from the bag and step aside. Celeste stared at me like she'd been waiting for the monster to finally show its teeth. I slowly lifted both hands. The packet slid forward enough for the red stamp to show. A woman from the hospital delegation whispered, "Oh my God." Julian backed away as if theft were contagious. Marcus lowered his eyes in a performance of grief. So perfect. I almost admired the craftsmanship. I warned everyone this could happen, he said. Celeste's mouth parted, and for 1 second, I saw something other than anger there. Fear, maybe, or recognition. Then it vanished. Search the bag, she said. Search all of it. I looked at her, at Marcus, at the watching crowd, and finally understood the shape of his plan. He did not just want to steal my work. He wanted to make sure that when the truth came out, no one would believe the woman holding it. Diane removed the packet from my bag with the careful hands of someone lifting a weapon. The red confidential stamp faced outward, bright enough to stain every expression in the ballroom. These documents are restricted to the secured prep room, she said. More to the room than to me. Only senior presenters and legal review had access. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, as if the betrayal wounded him. Harper had access last year, before the incident, he said. Old habits can be hard to break. I stared at him, and the old helpless rage rose in my throat. Hot and useless. I didn't put those in my bag. My voice was quiet, almost too quiet to defend me. Celeste gave a cold laugh that did not reach her eyes. Of course you didn't. Documents just climb into handbags when you walk by. The hospital delegates exchanged glances. That was the true damage. Not the packet. Not the accusation. The tiny shift in strangers' eyes when they decided the story already made sense. Diane asked security to escort me to a side conference room. Marcus insisted on coming as my direct supervisor, while Celeste followed without being invited. Her arms folded around herself like she was holding in something more complicated than anger. The side room had beige walls, a long table, and one glass window looking back into the ballroom where people were pretending not to watch. Diane placed my bag on the table and catalogued every item wallet. Lip balm, phone charger, hotel key, crumpled receipt, the scratched silver USB. Marcus's gaze flicked to the USB, then away. What's on that drive? Diane asked. I reached for it before remembering everyone was waiting for me to look guilty. Personal files, I said. Marcus tilted his head. Harper, this is not the time to be evasive. I wanted to tell Diane the drive held the version history of a stolen project, the truth Marcus had spent a year burying, and the reason he was trying to destroy me tonight. Instead, I said, photos, medical documents for my brother. That was the first time Celeste's expression changed. It was small, almost invisible, But I saw it because I had spent a year studying her face across conference tables, trying to understand how someone so admired could be so cruel without ever raising her voice. Her eyes dropped to the USB, then to my hand. Marcus saw it too, and his smile thinned. "Let's stay focused," he said. "The issue is that confidential hospital projections were found in Harper's bag." Diane asked where I had been in the last 20 minutes. I told her by the buffet, near the side entrance. Briefly speaking with Marcus. Marcus looked pained. I spoke to Harper because she seemed upset. I never touched her bag. He said it before anyone asked. That was the mistake. So tiny, only a person trained by fear would hear it. Diane wrote something down. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Not at me this time, but at him. They suspended me from the next morning's rehearsal, pending review. Not formally. Not with paperwork. Because people like Marcus preferred fog to fingerprints. Diane said I should remain available and not discuss the matter with clients. Marcus walked me out of the conference room, with one hand hovering near my back. Never touching. Always performing concern. "You make things so difficult," he murmured, when the hallway swallowed the ballroom noise. "All you had to do was stay quiet for 3 days." I stopped walking. I have stayed quiet for a year. His face did not change, but his voice dropped. "And your brother has kept his cardiologist for a year. Gratitude would look better on you." My phone buzzed in my palm before I could answer. A message from Jonas Clinic appeared. "Insurance authorization. Pending review. Please contact provider." My lungs forgot how to work. Marcus looked down at the screen and sighed softly. Like a teacher disappointed by a slow student. When I returned to the suite, Celeste was already there. She had changed out of her cream blazer and into a silk robe, the color of smoke. But she still looked armored. The laptop sat open on the desk, casting pale light across the room. "Did you do it?" she asked without turning. I shut the door behind me. "No, that's all. That's all I have energy for." She spun around then, anger flashing again. "Do you know what happens if the hospital thinks our team mishandles restricted projections? Do you know what happens to the contract?" I laughed once. Not because anything was funny, but because pain sometimes needed a sound. "You mean your contract?" She stood. "There it is. That resentment. That's what I've seen in your face all year." I looked at the bed between us. The stupid decorative pillows lined up like a border treaty. "You have no idea what you've seen in my face." Celeste stepped closer. "Then explain it." I almost did. The USB felt heavy in my pocket, but Jonah's message was still burning on my phone. So I said nothing. Silence was safer. Silence was also the thing that had ruined me. Celeste took my silence as guilt and turned away with a bitter shake of her head. "Fine. I'll sleep on the left side. You stay on the right. If you cross the middle, I swear to God." "Harper, I won't." She dragged a row of pillows down the center of the king-size bed. A childish wall in a room neither of us wanted. I changed in the bathroom and came out in a t-shirt and sweatpants, feeling stripped of every professional layer I had worn like armor. Celeste was already under the covers, stiff as a statue, her phone clutched in one hand. I lay on my side with my back to her, close enough to hear her breathing and far enough to feel lonelier than if I had slept in the hallway. Outside the window, Denver glittered cold and distant. Inside, the room held every word. We were too proud, or too scared to say. Sometime after midnight. I woke to the sound of Celeste whispering. At first I thought she was dreaming. Then I saw the bathroom, light, glowing under the door, and heard Marcus's voice through her phone. Faint but unmistakable. "You are not thinking clearly," he said. Celeste's reply was ragged. "You planted those documents too cleanly." Diane noticed something. My body went still. Marcus's tone hardened. "Diane notices what I tell her to notice. Your job is to keep Harper unstable and away from that presentation." Celeste said nothing for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "You promised my mother's settlement would stay sealed." Marcus laughed softly, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Then don't make me regret helping your family. Smile tomorrow. Present the pitch. Let Harper bury herself, unless you want Evelyn Ward's name attached to fraud by noon." The call ended. The bathroom went silent, except for one broken breath. Celeste opened the door a minute later and found me sitting upright in bed. Whatever she saw on my face told her I had heard enough. For once, she did not attack first. She stood barefoot in the blue bathroom light, looking younger without makeup, her perfect hair loose around her shoulders. "How much did you hear?" she asked. I could have lied. I could have used the truth like a knife. Instead, I said, "Enough to know he talks to you the same way he talks to me." Her chin lifted automatically. But the old Celeste did not come back all the way. "You don't know anything about me. I know he has something on your mother." She flinched before she could stop herself. The room changed then. Not healed. Not safe. But changed. The wall of pillows suddenly looked ridiculous. Like a fence built between two prisoners in the same locked cell. Celeste sat slowly on the edge of the bed. "Why didn't you say something before?" I looked at her, and for the first time since I had known Celeste Ward, I saw exhaustion instead of polish. Because nobody believes the woman Marcus Vale points at. The answer landed between us with more truth than either of us expected. Celeste rubbed her hands over her face. "I thought you hated me. You made that easy to believe." "No," she whispered, eyes shining now. "I mean, you had chances. Real chances. You saw things. You knew when I was scared in that boardroom last spring. You knew I didn't write the algorithm notes the way Marcus said I did. You could have exposed me." Her voice broke on the last word. Not dramatically. Not for pity. But from the pressure of holding herself together too long. Then she asked the question so quietly. I almost missed it. "Why did you never hate me?" I stared at the silver USB on the nightstand, at the tiny scratches across its metal skin, and felt the past opening like a wound neither of us was ready to touch. I did not answer Celeste right away. Some questions were too heavy to lift in the dark, especially when they came from the person who had stood beside your ruin and called it procedure. I reached for the USB on the nightstand, then stopped before my fingers touched it. Celeste watched the movement, her eyes red but alert, as if she understood that whatever lived inside that little scratched drive could change the shape of both our lives. "You really want to know why?" I asked. She nodded once. Outside, a siren moved somewhere far below the hotel, fading through the Denver streets. Because last spring, after the board voted to name you lead strategist, I saw you in the women's restroom on the 32nd floor. You were crying so hard you couldn't breathe. Marcus was outside the door, telling you that winners didn't get to have nerves. Celeste looked away, And the shame that crossed her face was not the shame of being exposed. It was the shame of being remembered. She sat on the edge of the bed with both hands pressed between her knees. No longer the untouchable Celeste Ward from company newsletters. I didn't know anyone heard that. You weren't supposed to know. I said, that was the point. He made sure nobody saw the bruises he left. Because his bruises didn't show on skin. Her throat moved. I still let them blame you. Yes. I did not soften the word. She deserved the truth. And so did I. You sat across from me in that review, while Marcus called me unstable. You watched him show them altered access logs. You watched him say I leaked a test packet out of jealousy. Celeste closed her eyes. He told me if I contradicted him, my mother's settlement would be reopened. He said she could go to prison. I know. Her eyes snapped open. How I looked at the USB again. Because Marcus used people's fear like a filing system. He labeled us, stored us, and pulled us out whenever he needed leverage. Celeste reached for her phone on the blanket, and then seemed to think better of it. What exactly is on that drive? Enough to prove the first version of the hospital model was mine. Enough to prove Marcus changed the metadata before the review. Enough to prove the packet in my bag tonight came from his printer. Not the secure prep room. The words hung between us. Dangerous and alive. Celeste's face went pale. Then why haven't you used it? I laughed softly. And this time there was no humor in it at all. Because he made sure the truth had a price. My brother's insurance. Mid-job. My reputation. And because the first time I tried to report him, Diane Roswell told me the evidence was inconclusive. Celeste whispered. Diane isn't corrupt. No. She's cautious. Marcus doesn't need everyone to be corrupt. He only needs good people to hesitate long enough. That sentence seemed to hit her harder than an accusation. Morning came without either of us really sleeping. The pillow wall remained down the center of the bed. But sometime near dawn, Celeste had stopped facing away from me. We moved around the room in silence. Two women dressing for a battlefield in tailored blazers and hotel mirror light. She wore navy instead of cream. I wore black because it hid coffee stains and fear. Before we left, Celeste paused at the door. If I ask you for 1 hour, will you give it to me? I looked at her carefully. Trust was not a switch. It was a locked room with 100 keys. And Marcus had stolen most of mine. For what? To check something in the pitch file Marcus gave me. She swallowed. There's a section on patient readmission risk. I never wrote it. I presented it for months. But I never understood why the variable weights felt wrong. My hand tightened around my bag strap. Because he cut out the ethics filter. Celeste stared at me. You built an ethics filter. I built the whole first framework. The rehearsal room was on the 4th floor. All glass walls and expensive coffee. Already humming with panic disguised as productivity. Marcus stood at the head of the table, charming the hospital representatives who had arrived early. When he saw us enter together, something dark passed across his face so quickly, anyone else might have missed it. Good morning, he said. I didn't expect you two to come down as a pair. Celeste smiled, the smile she used in rooms full of men who underestimated how well she could lie when cornered. We survived the bed. Marcus. A few people chuckled awkwardly. I took a seat near the back. Officially suspended from presenting, but not yet banned from breathing. Marcus's ice, Lingonubeg. Harbor. Legal review is still ongoing. It might be best if you observe quietly. That's what I've been doing for a year, I said before I could stop myself. The room went still. Celeste looked at me, not with warning, but with something almost like permission. Marcus recovered first. Let's begin. The rehearsal started with Celeste's opening slides, polished and empty in the way Marcus liked big claims. Clean fonts. No fingerprints. But when she reached the readmission risk model, her voice slowed. I watched her see it in real time. The gap I had noticed months ago. Without the ethics filter, the model over-prioritized patients with high reimbursement potential and quietly deprioritized rural cases, older patients, and people with unstable insurance histories. It was not just a technical flaw. It was a scandal waiting to become a lawsuit. Celeste clicked to the next slide, then stopped. Marcus, where is the bias correction appendix? His smile did not move. We trimmed it for clarity. No, she said. This model cannot go to a hospital network without it. Marcus's hand flattened on the table. Celeste, perhaps you should stick to the approved script. There it was again, the velvet leash. Pulled tight in public. Dr. Elaine Porter leaned forward. Miss Ward. Is there an issue with the model? Marcus answered before Celeste could. No issue. Internal debate. Our team is passionate. I saw Celeste's jaw tremble. Not with fear this time, but with rage. Then Marcus made his mistake. He looked at me and said, Unfortunately, some former contributors have struggled to accept final leadership decisions. The room turned toward me again. The familiar machinery of suspicion grinding back to life. My phone buzzed under the table. Another message from Jonah's clinic. Authorization. Delayed due to employer verification. I felt the floor tilt. Marcus had already moved. He was not waiting for me to disobey. He was punishing me in advance. Celeste saw the message reflected faintly in the black glass tabletop. Her face changed. Not softened. Sharpened. She turned back to Marcus and said, We need a 10-minute break. Denied. He replied pleasantly. We are on a client schedule. Celeste closed the laptop. The sound was not loud, but it struck the room like a gavel. Then I'm not presenting this section. Marcus stared at her. And for the first time since I had known him, his mask slipped enough to show the panic underneath. You will present what Hailworth approved. Celeste stood. Hailworth did not approve a model that could discriminate against patients. You are not qualified to make that accusation. He said it softly, but everyone heard the threat beneath it. I rose before I could talk myself out of it. She is qualified to ask where the missing appendix went. Marcus turned to me with a look that promised consequences. Sit down. Harper. No. My voice shook, but it did not break. The appendix existed in the March version. It was removed after the authorship transfer. Diane Roswell, who had been standing near the door with a legal folder, looked up sharply. Authorship transfer. Marcus's face went still. Celeste whispered, almost to herself. He told me it was always mine. The break happened because Dr. Porter requested it, not because Marcus allowed it. That mattered. For the first time, control had moved out of his hands and into the room. Celeste and I stepped into the hallway, where the glass walls made privacy impossible, but urgency made caution difficult. Show me, she said. I opened my laptop on a narrow console table near the elevators, plugged in the silver USB, and entered the password with fingers that trembled so badly I mistyped it once. Folders appeared, March drafts, metadata, logs, print, watermarks, audio notes. Celeste covered her mouth. You kept everything. I kept breathing. Same skill. I opened the March model. There was my name. Harper Lane. Embedded in the original version history, beside every major framework revision. Celeste leaned closer, her eyes scanning the screen. Then she froze. Maurice. Ward's scholarship letter. I moved to close the folder. But she caught my wrist. Not hard. Desperate. Why is my mother's name in your files? I pulled my hand away gently. That was the wound I had not meant to open in a hotel hallway. When I was 17, my father died with more debt than insurance. I was going to turn down Northwestern because I couldn't afford the housing deposit. A foundation paid it anonymously. Celeste's lips parted. My mother's foundation. I didn't know until years later. I recognized the signature on a scanned letter in an old scholarship archive. Her eyes filled again. But this time the tears seemed to come from somewhere deeper than fear. You knew who I was when I joined Haleworth. Yes. And when I took your project. Yes. She stepped back, as if I had slapped her. That is why you never hated me. I looked through the glass wall at Marcus, who was speaking rapidly into his phone, his perfect posture fraying at the edges. No, I said. That is why I tried not to. There's a difference. Before Celeste could answer, her phone rang. Marcus's name filled the screen. She stared at it, then hit record before answering. I saw the decision happen in her face, like a door unlocking. Where are you? Marcus demanded. Loud enough that I could hear every word. Celeste's voice went calm, checking the model. Stop pretending you're brave. Your mother's sealed agreement exists because I allow it to exist. Harper's brother breathes on company insurance because I allow that too. Both of you are replaceable by lunch. Celeste looked at me, and all the color drained from her face. Marcus continued. Careless now. Drunk on control. Get back in there. Present my deck. And let Harper take the fall for the documents. After tonight, she'll be toxic. You'll be grateful. And I'll be COO. The call ended. Celeste lowered the phone slowly. In her hand was the first clean weapon Marcus had not known he was giving us. Celeste did not move for several seconds after the call ended. The hallway around us seemed too bright, too clean, too ordinary for the thing that had just happened inside her hand. Marcus had finally said the quiet parts out loud, and the little red recording bar on her phone had caught every word. I expected triumph to hit me first. It didn't. What came instead was terror. Raw and physical. Because evidence was only powerful if you survived long enough to use it. Celeste looked at the rehearsal room, where Marcus was already turning back toward the table, with his practiced smile restored. He'll deny it, she whispered. He'll say it's edited. I unplugged the USB and slid it into my pocket. Then we don't give him one piece. We give them all of it. Her eyes met mine. The recording. Your logs? The watermark. The key card. I nodded. And we do it where he can't bury the room. Diane Roswell found us before we could return. She walked fast. Legal folder pressed to her chest. Her expression caught between suspicion and alarm. Harper, I need to ask what you meant by authorship transfer. Marcus had probably sent her to contain me, but Diane was too careful to be easily owned. I looked through the glass at the people waiting inside. Not here. Diane's mouth tightened. You are already under review for possession of restricted documents. Choosing secrecy now is not wise. Celeste stepped forward before I could answer. Diane. The documents in Harper's bag were planted. Diane's eyes flicked to her. That is a serious allegation. Good, Celeste said, and her voice did not shake, because I'm making it seriously. For the first time all morning, Diane seemed to understand that something had shifted. I took out my hotel keycard, the one with the black mark near the magnetic strip. Can you pull timestamp logs from the Grand Meridian? Diane hesitated, only once, then called hotel security from a quiet alcove near the elevators. We waited in silence, while Marcus watched us through the glass wall, his stare sharpening with every passing second. Celeste stood beside me, close enough that our sleeves almost touched, and I realized how strange it was that sharing a bed had felt less intimate than sharing danger. When Diane returned, she looked paler. According to hotel access logs, your room was opened at 6:18 p.m. with a master-issued duplicate before either of your assigned cards were used. Celeste looked at me. My check-in had been after 6:30. Hers too, Diane continued. Quieter now. The duplicate was authorized under the conference coordinator account. Marcus controlled the coordinator account. He controlled everything until people started looking at the locks. Celeste exhaled slowly. He went into our room before we did. Diane closed her folder. I am not saying that yet. No, I said, but you're thinking it. The final presentation began at 2 o'clock in the ballroom. Transformed from a cocktail space into a theater of corporate confidence. Rows of chairs faced a stage with Haleworth's logo glowing behind a podium. Hospital executives sat in the front row. Board members filled the second. Our own team lined the sides, whispering into phones, pretending not to know that a scandal had been circling since breakfast. Marcus opened with charm. Of course, men like him could stand on a burning floor and sell the smoke as atmosphere. Today, he said, smiling beneath the stage lights, Haleworth offers not just technology, but trust. I sat near the back under Diane's instruction. Officially present as a technical observer, Celeste stood near the screen with a remote in her hand. When Marcus introduced her as the mind behind our strategic model, applause rose politely. She did not smile. She looked at me once, then at Marcus, and clicked to the first slide. For 20 minutes, Celeste presented exactly as expected. Her voice was steady, her posture elegant, her answers precise. Marcus relaxed by degrees, mistaking performance for surrender. Then she reached the slide titled Predictive Readmission Intelligence. The heart of the deal. The stolen framework that had cost me a year of my life. Celeste stopped speaking. The silence stretched long enough for Dr. Porter to lift her head. Marcus leaned toward his microphone. Celeste. She did not look at him. Before I continue, I need to correct the record. The air changed. I felt it in my ribs. Marcus gave a small laugh. Any technical clarifications can wait until Q&A. Celeste turned toward the board. This is not a clarification. It is a confession. Someone in the second row shifted sharply. Marcus's smile vanished at the edges. Celeste. Step away from the screen. She clicked once, and the title slide disappeared. The next slide was not in Marcus's deck. It showed a version history table from my March draft. My name, repeated in the author column beside the original ethics filter. Bien. Correction appendix. And hospital risk mode. A murmur broke through the room. I could barely breathe. Seeing my name up there felt like watching a buried body rise. Celeste's voice remained steady. I did not create the original framework. Harper Lane did. Her work was transferred, renamed, and presented under my leadership without proper attribution. Marcus stood. This is absurd. That file has not been verified. Diane rose from her seat near the aisle. It is being verified now. Another murmur. Louder, this time. Celeste clicked again. The hidden watermark report appeared, showing the confidential packet found in my bag had been printed from the executive printer assigned to Marcus Vale's office suite at 7:04 p.m. After the secured prep room had been locked, Marcus stepped toward the stage, no longer smiling. This is a coordinated attack by two unstable employees trying to deflect from misconduct. There it was. His last weapon made the women sound emotional, desperate, unreliable. Celeste's hand trembled around the remote. I stood before fear could argue with me, then explained the hotel access logs. Diane took the stage without waiting for permission and projected the report hotel security had sent. The master duplicate entry appeared beside the timestamp. Conference coordinator account. Room 1842. Chest. Osemneist Pu. M. The same room Celeste and I had been forced to share. Dr. Porter turned slowly toward Marcus. Were you aware someone entered their room before? Check-in. Marcus's jaw tightened. I manage dozens of logistics details. I don't personally track key cards. I walked down the aisle with the USB in my hand. Every face turned toward me. For once, I let them look. Diane inserted the drive into the presentation laptop. Folder, befolder. The truth opened. Metadata logs showed my authorship. Email headers showed Marcus forwarding my drafts to himself before the alleged leak. Printer records tied the planted packet to his floor. Audio notes from last year captured his voice, telling me that perception mattered more than truth. Marcus shouted over the first recording, but that only made him look more afraid. Then, Celeste lifted her phone. There is one more file. She connected it to the room audio. Marcus's voice filled the ballroom. Stripped of polish and mercy, Harper's brother breathes on company insurance, because I allow that too. Both of you are replaceable by lunch. The room went utterly still. My hands shook so badly I clasped them together. Celeste looked at the board. Tears bright in her eyes, but not falling. He used my mother to control me. He used Harper's brother to silence her. And he used this company to make both of us look like enemies. Marcus tried to recover. He turned to the board chair. Then to Dr. Porter. Then to the room, searching for the weakest face. This is being taken out of context. No one moved to help him. That was the sound of power, leaving a man who had mistaken fear for loyalty. The board chair stood slowly. Mr. Val, surrender your badge to security. Marcus's face flushed, dark, red. You cannot be serious. This presentation This contract. Everything in this room exists because of me. Doctor. Porter's voice was calm and lethal. No. Mr. Val. It appears much of it exists because of Miss Lane. Security appeared at the side doors. Two men in black suits, moving with professional quiet. Marcus looked at Celeste then, and the hatred in his eyes was so naked that several people saw it at once. You stupid girl. Hey, sit. Celeste flinched, but she did not step back. No, she said, just finally awake. When security took Marcus by the arms, he twisted once toward me. You think this saves you, he snapped. You're still nobody without this company. A year earlier, those words would have folded me in half. That day, under the ballroom lights, with my stolen work glowing behind me and the whole room watching the man who had built his throne out of our silence. They passed through me like smoke. Maybe, I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. But I'd rather be nobody with the truth than somebody standing on other people's throats. Diane closed the laptop. But the room did not return to normal. It could not. Some people avoided my eyes. Others looked ashamed. Julian from finance stared at the floor. Doctor. Porter approached me slowly. Not as if I were a scandal, but as if I were the person she should have been speaking to from the beginning. Ms. Lane, she said, I believe we need to restart this presentation. Restarting the presentation felt stranger than exposing Marcus. Maybe, because destruction had a rhythm, I understood accusation, denial, evidence, collapse, building something honest in the same room where I had just been humiliated required a different kind of courage. Doctor. Porter asked for a 15-minute recess while the board conferred with Diane. And during those 15 minutes, no one knew where to look. Celeste stood beside the stage, still holding her phone like it might burn her. Julian from finance approached me, opened his mouth, then closed it when he realized there was no apology short enough to fit what he had laughed at. I did not rescue him from the silence. For once, I let someone else stand inside discomfort without softening the walls. My phone buzzed again. I braced for another clinic message. Another delayed authorization. Another invisible hand around Jonah's throat. Instead, Diane touched my shoulder and said, Harper, legal has frozen all employment-related insurance changes pending investigation. Your brother's coverage is protected. I walked into the hallway before my knees could betray me in front of everyone. The moment the ballroom doors closed behind me, the breath I had been holding for a year finally broke apart. I leaned against the wall near a gold-framed mirror and pressed both hands over my face. I did not sob beautifully. I shook like someone coming down from a car crash. For months, I had imagined the truth would feel clean, sharp, victorious. It did not. It felt like pulling a blade out and realizing the wound was still there. Celeste came out a minute later, but stopped several feet away, careful not to assume she had earned closeness. I'm sorry, she said. The words were quiet and plain. No performance. No corporate language. I know that doesn't fix anything. I lowered my hands. Her eyes were swollen. Her perfect mascara ruined. No, I said. It doesn't. She nodded as if she deserved that. Maybe she did. When we returned, the board chair announced that Marcus Vale had been suspended pending immediate external investigation. and all materials related to the Denver proposal would be reviewed for authorship, compliance, and data ethics. He looked older than he had an hour earlier, as if embarrassment had added years faster than time. "Miss Lane," he said. "Doctor Porter has requested that you walk us through the original framework. If you are willing." Willing. The word almost made me laugh. For a year, I had been useful only when silent. Now the room needed my voice, and had to ask for it. I stepped onto the stage and saw the faces that had watched my bag be searched. Watched Marcus imply I was unstable. Watched Celeste call for suspicion. I placed the silver USB beside the laptop. "The first thing you need to know," I said, "is that predictive medicine without ethical guardrails does not save lives equally. It saves the lives easiest to bill for." The room stayed silent as I walked them through the original model. I showed how the ethics filter corrected for insurance instability, rural access, race-adjacent proxy variables, bias, and prior care gaps. I explained how Marcus's stripped version would have produced impressive cost projections while quietly abandoning the patients most likely to be overlooked. Dr. Porter listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to anger to something like respect. Celeste stayed off stage, refusing to stand beside work that was not hers. That choice mattered more than her apology. At the end, Dr. Porter stood and faced the board. "This is the model we came here hoping existed," she said. "Not the one Mr. Vale tried to sell us." The contract was not signed that day. It could not be. Not after everything. But Dr. Porter agreed to keep negotiations open. Under one condition, I would lead the technical and ethical reconstruction. With direct reporting access to the board, Marcus's downfall did not end at the ballroom doors. By evening, his badge access was disabled. His office was sealed, and Diane had transferred the evidence to outside counsel. 2 senior executives who had ignored my original complaint were placed on administrative leave. The conference coordinator account revealed more than the room key. Marcus had used it to alter travel assignments, meeting rooms, and document access for months, always creating confusion that made someone else look careless. His promised COO appointment vanished before dinner. His bonus package was frozen. By the next morning, the hospital network's attorneys requested a full audit of every Haleworth proposal he had touched. I heard later that when he tried to call 3 board members privately, none of them answered. That detail satisfied me more than I expected. Men like Marcus believed doors existed only to open for them. I hoped every unanswered ring taught him what it felt like to stand outside a locked room. Celeste paid too, though not the way Marcus did. She stood before the board and admitted that she had accepted credit for work she did not create. Even while under pressure, no one dragged the words out of her. She said them herself, voice shaking but clear. She resigned from the lead strategist role and asked to be removed from all promotional materials tied to the hospital model. She also signed a sworn statement about Marcus's threats against her mother and his threats against Jonah's insurance. The board chair offered to delay any decision about her employment until after the investigation. But Celeste shook her head. "I don't want another title built on someone else's silence," she said. I watched her say it and felt something loosen. Not forgiveness, exactly, but the first crack in the story Marcus had written for us. She was not innocent. Neither was she the monster I had needed her to be when hating someone felt easier than hurting. That night, I finally called Jonah. He answered on the third ring, breathless and annoyed in the way only a 23-year-old younger brother could be while recovering from heart complications. "You didn't text me back," he said. I sat on the hotel bed, the same bed Celeste and I had divided with pillows the night before, and looked at the city lights beyond the window. I had a complicated day. Did your scary boss do something? I closed my eyes. Jonah knew more than I wanted him to, because illness made families bad at hiding fear. My scary boss is not my boss anymore. There was a pause. Then Jonah said, "Good." I hated that guy. I laughed, and the sound came out half broken, half alive. He told me the clinic had called to confirm coverage. I told him I might be staying in Denver another day. I did not tell him that for the first time in a year, I could imagine coming home without carrying Marcus's shadow behind me. Near midnight, Celeste knocked on the open door, connecting the suite hallway to the sitting area. She had changed into jeans and a sweater, looking less like a company icon and more like a tired woman who had run out of armor. In her hands was a cream envelope, old and softened at the corners. I asked my mother to send this. She said she kept copies of every foundation letter. I took it carefully. Inside was a scanned note from Evelyn Ward's education fund, approving an emergency housing grant for a student named Harper Lane. At the bottom was a handwritten line. "Some young women only need one door opened. They will do the rest themselves." My throat tightened so hard I could not speak. Celeste stood by the armchair, twisting her fingers. She remembered you. Not by name at first, but when I told her Northwestern, Southside, father deceased, she cried. She said she always wondered what happened to the girl who sent a thank you card with a pressed violet inside. I sat down slowly with the letter in my lap. That thank you card had cost me $3 and an hour of choosing the right words, because I had wanted an anonymous stranger to know she had not wasted her kindness. Celeste looked at the floor. "When I joined Haleworth, and you looked at me like you already knew me, I thought it was jealousy. Marcus told me it was jealousy. I let that be easier than asking. I folded the letter along its old crease. I did hate you sometimes," I said. She looked up, startled. "Not all the way. Not cleanly. But sometimes. Yes. When they applauded you for my work. When you stayed quiet. When you looked at me like I was something unpleasant, stuck to your shoe." Her eyes filled again. But she did not look away. "I deserve that. You deserve to hear it." I said, "That's different." The silence after that was not comfortable, but it was honest. And honest silence felt almost gentle compared to the lies we had lived inside. In the morning, Haleworth offered me a promotion with a title so long it sounded like a committee had invented it out of guilt, Chief Ethics and Data Integrity Officer. I told them I would consider it under conditions. Jonah's coverage would be guaranteed in writing, independent of managerial discretion. The company would create a protected reporting channel outside the chain of command. Every employee disciplined under Marcus's leadership would have their case reviewed, and Celeste's testimony would not be buried to protect the brand. The board chair looked uncomfortable. "Good. Those are significant requests," he said. I placed the silver USB on the table between us. "So was surviving your company, Doctor." Porter smiled faintly at that. "By noon." They agreed, in principle. By sunset, Diane sent the first written draft. It was not justice wrapped in a bow. It was policy, signature, leverage, and records. I had learned the hard way that healing needed paperwork too. Celeste left Denver before I did. At the hotel entrance, she paused beside the black car, waiting to take her to the airport. "Can I ask you one more time?" she said. I already knew the question. Maybe she needed the answer in daylight. Maybe I did too. "Why did you never hate me?" I looked at her. Really looked. Without Marcus between us. Because hating you would have made the cage feel like mine. I said, and because somewhere under all that polish, I think I saw another woman trapped in it too. She wiped one tear quickly, almost embarrassed by it. "Are we friends now?" I thought about the year I lost. The apologies still unpaid. The trust that could not grow overnight just because the villain had fallen. "No," I said gently. "But we're not enemies anymore." Celeste nodded. And this time, her smile was small, sad, and real. Then she stepped into the car and closed the door herself. A month later, I stood in Haleworth's Chicago office before a new team, explaining the ethics framework that would now carry my name in every document. Not Marcus's, not Celeste's, mine. Jonah texted me a photo from his clinic chair, giving me a thumbs up with a caption that said, "Still breathing without Marcus's permission." I laughed so hard. 2 analysts looked over in surprise. On my desk, beside my monitor, sat the silver USB and Evelyn Ward's letter in a simple frame. I kept them there not because I wanted to remember the pain, but because I wanted to remember the proof truth could be delayed, mocked, planted over, and dragged through a ballroom in shame. But it did not die just because powerful people stopped looking at it. Sometimes it waited inside a scratched little drive. Sometimes it waited inside, a question asked in the dark. And sometimes, when the locked room finally opened, the woman you thought was your rival walked out beside you.